all of this is part of BJP's politics of vengeance. When somebody says Umar Khalid, a major section of the society stops listening. All they hear is, oh, Umar Khalid. So terrorist, anti-national, that's all that they hear. For example, they chose Umar or Asharjeel. Today it is Umar Khalid, so you think it is okay. It can be your child, it can be your own children. 17-year-old Vedant, who gave his 12th standard exams and showed on social media that, oh, this is not my answer sheet. He was called a Pakistani by a BJP member. Palestine genocide that is ongoing. When students were protesting here in Kerala, in solidarity with Palestine, they were arrested and cases were filed against them. I met an activist today who has an UAPA, who had a UAPA registered. Yes. So a UAPA was registered in his name because one section is anti-national, other is Pakistani, someone is foreign funded, someone is Khalistani, someone is Dimagi Naxal. So all the people, the common people, democracy-loving people in this country have been labelled something. Left parties, before anyone else, have to come down on a common agenda.
ഇന്ത്യയിലെ യുവജന പ്രക്ഷോഭ ചരിത്രത്തിലെ നാഴികക്കല്ലായ ജന്തർ മന്തർ പ്രതിഷേധങ്ങളുടെ നേതൃമുഖങ്ങളിൽ ഒരാളും ഐസയുടെ ദേശീയ പ്രസിഡന്റുമായ നെഹ ബോറയാണ് ഇന്ന് മീഡിയാവിനൊപ്പം ചേരുന്നത്. നെഹ, വെൽക്കം. നെഹ, after the protest you have been traveling across the country a lot. How do you see the country right now? Do you feel that something has changed after the protest?
No, actually, when we were deciding on this Gen Z Rising campaign and going to different places, we were thinking of taglines. So one of the tagline was, let 1,000 Jantar Mantars bloom. We're thinking Gen Z Rising campaign, let 1,000 Jantar Mantars bloom. So I think when I'm visiting different places right now, different cities, different states, I actually feel like there are 1,000 Jantar Mantars blooming in this country. And all of them, not all of them, but most of them took this energy and this, oh, we can also do it, after in the kind of energy that was generated after the Jantar Mantar protests. So the protest in Jharkhand, where people sat down on hunger strike, I met several of them, 2 of them were women. So they were saying that, we saw that you're also sitting and we thought our problem is also great, we'll also sit. So they sat down. The ISI protest had been going on much before the Jantar Mantar protests, but they also called and they said that it's great that we are extending solidarity. And then in other places, Chennai, Vijayawada, now here. So it actually looks like people have thought that, oh, this is the country we are living in. It does not seem okay to let it continue this way, to let this system continue on existing the way it is existing. So let's change it. How do we change it? We take a leaf from the book of Jantar Mantar and we sit down on indefinite sit-ins or hunger strikes or protests, and that is what is happening, and it is truly inspiring to see.
While we talk about this, after the struggle came the crackdown from the side of the state. So actually they promised that there will be no repercussions against the protesters who were part of the Jantar Mantar protest, but it was very harsh, especially against the Muslims. Junaid is one of the example. So what do you think about these things?
No, it looks exactly like what BJP's politics has looked like over past 1 decade. The fact that you promise something to people and then you ask them to get up from their protest, binding that promise as, one condition. And then the kind of crackdown that has taken place in Bihar, over 600 people were arrested. In Bengal, specifically Muslim people were arrested, and it was said that it was Jumme ke log who were protesting. From the chief minister, he said this. Then we saw in Delhi and in other places the kind of witch hunting that was happening of women protesters specifically, the filing of 5 FIRs on 15-year-old girl. So all of this is part of BJP's politics of vengeance. They never swallow, they never roll over. They're always vengeful. They're always looking for a way to, humiliate you, teach you a lesson if you say anything against them. So all of this is in line with them and their politics. And it's interesting that all of the lines of division that they have deepened within the past over a decade, they continue even in the crackdown and the state repression. It was along these lines that the repression happened. Muslim students picked up in Bengal and other places. Junaid is an example of that. In Jamia, several people were detained at Nizamuddin police station. Women being targeted and their character being called into question. or Bajrang Dal goons visiting their homes to teach them culture and teach their families culture. This misogynist crackdown. In Bihar, protesters were asked their full name so that they could figure out what their caste is, and then subjected to violence. So all of these divisions along the lines of caste, religion, gender that already have been deepened because of the BJP and the RSS, it was along these lines that they did the repression also. There is this young individual who says that मोदी जी आप टीवी पे आने लगे इतना हर रोज़ आप टीवी पे आते थे so we would see your face every time we would open the television, so we stopped opening our televisions. Then we would read newspapers and your face and your advertisement would be plastered on every page, so we stopped reading newspapers. Now you have come to Instagram. Why are you doing this to us young people, that this one place where we engage with each other in, you're budging in, you're putting your nose even there. So this understanding that why did people stop watching the television, or why did people stop buying newspapers? Because they realized that their stories were never written on newspapers, or their stories were never being told in primetime TV. It was just the same old propaganda, the same old Arnab keep shouting and shouting from for the entire duration of his show, the same bullying of people who disagree with the government on their shows, the same campaigns and propaganda plastered across newspapers. That's why people stopped it. People stopped reading newspapers and watching mainstream television because they never saw themselves or their issues being reflected in those. That is why people started watching independent media or YouTube channels, because they thought they were truer to what they were facing. What they were showing was truer to the picture of actual India. So if Instagram becomes regimented just like the mainstream channels and newspapers, then of course people will look for a different way of expressing themselves. It is the age of internet. If they capture one place, people are going to shift to another place, find new avenues to interact with each other.
So you believe that the right wing or the BJP regime has no ways to influence the youth too?
No, I don't think so. I think the Gen Z is not, or the young people are not a homogeneous group. We are as diverse as the previous generations before us. Important part is that this age that the Gen Z is at right now, it is this age at which you decide what kind of adults you're going to be later in your life, right? And if at this age you get the confidence and you get the education that whatever is happening around you, the system that exists around you, need not also be the system in which you die. You can have a role to play in changing it. So this confidence, this dream of a better world and the confidence that you can make it happen, that is what the young people have currently. And that is why there is greater hope that they will perhaps not, follow what their previous generations have been doing. They will stand for the politics of solidarity and support instead of hate and communalism. That is the only hope. But otherwise, apart from that, of course, the Gen Z protesting at Jantar Mantar was also the Gen Z. And the Gen Z who's abusing us in our comment sections is also the Gen Z.
The biggest achievement of the protest, I feel, is that it broke the invincible image of Modi regime. Yesterday, Rahul Gandhi fought for filing an FIR against the pellet firing happened in the protest. So, do you think the political narrative is changing across the country?
Yes, I certainly believe, and more than believe, hope that this is happening. In fact, in my travels to different student movements and student protests in the past one and a half week, this is actually looking like the reality. That the student movement that we all saw at Jantar Mantar and in other parts of the country has actually set the mode of what young people now think is possible. What kind of engagement is possible with the government. So a government which whose center the Prime Minister claimed to say that I am non-biological, about whom this image was created, that 56-inch ka seena and all of that, and a government against which you can't speak, a Prime Minister who you cannot criticize, and a media which doesn't show your stories, that is what we were faced with. But this protest broke it, and so beautifully that now the Prime Minister has to come to Instagram to make reels, to seem more accessible to the young people. That the Home Minister could not show his face in the Parliament. That Mohan Bhagwat also has to sit down with the Gen Z and say that I am having an interaction. So this turning of the tables has only happened at the backdrop of the Jantar Mantar movement, and we really hope it sets a precedence of why and how. It's not the people who should be afraid of their governments. It's the government that must be truly afraid of people and the accountability that they will demand from them.
Even the left organizations have a huge network of across the universities and colleges. They are not being able to lead a movement in which the CJP did. So where do the left organizations, especially the left student organizations, fail in that? Why can't they lead such a big massive movement like we saw in the Jantar Mantar?
No, I think they have. I think the FYUP protests were led by the left student organizations. The movement against fee hike was led by the student organizations. And even this, I would say, even though the CJP created this platform, I would say that even the people who were at Jantar Mantar and the people who were witnessing the protests on their screens would argue that it was the left student organizations which led even this protest, along with the CJP, of course. So I think that left student movements have actually led mass movements in the past. But what also might be the problem is that why left student organizations are targeted more and more easily is because there is a larger context to the criminalization of left-wing politics. So right now, just as people are after CJP and its spokesperson's life about their funding, about their personal choices, about what they eat, what they don't eat, what they wear, how they behave, there is an entire ecosystem that is working in trying to delegitimize and discredit the CJP and the people around it, right? That has been, and that's also, it's new for them. And it's new for people also to witness this because it has come up as a cohesive platform or a force only recently. But this campaign against the left wing is very old. It in fact predates even this movement and even the Modi regime. It's been continuing since the Cold War era, where the left wing represented, or communism represented, an alternative mode of or another world, the possibility of another world. A world which was not in line with America's capitalist model. And that is why it was the biggest threat to America and to imperialist forces that such a model was coming into existence, and more countries were aligning themselves with the USSR, saying that this model, where the state believes that it is in fact the state's responsibility that common citizens have access to education, healthcare, employment, it is the state's responsibility that this happen, and not the onus of an individual. If you dare take an education, if you dare get your family members treated, if you dare get a job, show us how you get a job. The kind of politics that we think is the normal or the norm was not the norm. A lot of years and resources have gone into delegitimizing and in fact criminalizing the left and communism, right? So I think it's also a result of that. The same criminalization that Dalits face, Muslims face, JNU faces, is the same criminalization that the left faces. But it's great that after these protests, people are saying that we agree with what you're saying and we agree with the way you're saying it. Well, if you agree with what was being said at the protests by people like me, like other student activists, then you agree with what the left says. Yeah.
But they are failing electorally. Why do you think that happens?
I think I would say that there are two reasons. One of them is that electoral politics on its own is a kind of system which I would argue often defeats the very idea of equal representation and equal, that everybody's vote is equal and everybody has one vote. This fundamental understanding upon which we base democracies and their systems, that fundamental understanding is only defeated by the setup of electoral politics, right? So, first, for example, you and I are contesting in an election. You get the majority of votes and I get the second highest votes. So you get, 40% of the votes, I get about 30% of the votes. You get elected. Congratulations. But what about the 30% of the votes who voted for me? Where is their voice? So this system that exists, that even now in this country, there are thousands of villages where families either don't have the access to vote because those villages are Dalit villages, poor Muslim villages, or other such marginalized groups live in those villages, and the local feudal lords in that area or the local feudal mafia in that area, whenever elections come, they take the voter ID cards and vote on their behalf. This is the reality of today's India still. This is one thing. And the second thing is that even during elections, the kind of use of money and muscle, you threaten or intimidate villagers to vote for you in a polling booth. Because outside the polling booth, who is standing? Your armed goons are standing and people are forced to vote for you. Or bribing voters with, we know there is open distribution of alcohol, food, money, cash is spent, it flows like anything during elections. So all of this is defeated. I mean, the fact that there is use of muscle where poor people, marginalized sections are not allowed to vote and the local lords are allowed to vote. And the second, where they don't even actually have a choice, they don't know what is going on. Both act as a deterrent to what electoral democracy, the true aspirations of electoral democracy. On top of that, you put ideas like the SIR that is happening throughout the country, where you're disenfranchising an entire section from, having the fundamental right that all citizens should have, that they have the right to vote. All of that, and left politics and who this politics is aimed at serving. It's aimed at serving the working people, the common people, right? It's aimed at serving them. So if the common people are constantly disenfranchised by this very electoral system that is supposed to give equal representation and equal participation to all, then of course we start at a disadvantage. And then if you want to talk about funding, advertising, campaigning, who do we take money from? We take money from the workers. I'm sure you're aware of this. In Jharkhand and in Bihar, the campaign we did is, we took out pamphlets of 50 rupees, 10 rupees, and we asked for contributions. Because that is the limit of the contributions that we can ask for from people whose agendas and ideas we represent. So this is one idea. And this is not a problem with left politics. It's a problem with electoral politics, because it means that poor people or people at the margins of our society will not find their representation, because the forces that seek to represent them in parliament will not find it compatible to do electoral politics. That's one. And the second thing, like I said, SIR, gerrymandering, all of that, putting the EC, ED, CBI in your pockets, openly violating the code of conduct, giving inflammatory, casteist, communal speeches by the leaders of the BJP during elections. All of that is also, that's an increasing threat that we are currently witnessing. First was, of course, the institutional problems or systematic problems of our electoral democracy. And what we are witnessing now, SIR, gerrymandering, that is also an added problem right now. So I think that is all. But having said that, I do believe, and we do believe politically, that elections also do represent the aspirations of some common people. And while we continue to fight elections to be able to represent their aspirations, we will also continue to fight for elections which are truly democratic and also and find representation from the common people.
Is that the disintegration between the left parties a factor for these electoral defeats?
I think it is one of our dreams, especially, because I'm from the ML Liberation. It's one of our dreams. Our previous General Secretary wrote of a communist party under which all communist parties come together and fight for the aspirations and dreams of the working people of this country.
What's standing in the way for that unity?
Well, a lot is standing in the way, because while this is a dream, on practicality, it's perhaps a dream that not everybody shares. So we come down on common platforms all the time, but it is also the case that, we don't ask this to bourgeois parties. We don't ask them. All of these parties, even in the opposition, who are who are part of the anti-BJP front currently, they are bourgeois parties, right? When they come to power or when they were in power, of course, the level of attack on democratic institutions might not have been to the extent that the fascist BJP has pushed it to, but was it not similar? Were we not divided along the same lines? Were the kind of education policies or the kind of state policies that were being brought about by them also not similar? They were, right? They were, because they are bourgeois parties with different names and different flavors. Similarly, in the left, there are different parties who see the current scenario in a different light and see a path to a place where the aspirations of the working class are truly represented and they get to govern who is in the state, who is in power, in not only in the state but overall. There is a difference in opinion in that. So it's so easy to say that to the left, that why are you fractured, and not to bourgeois parties, because we are unfortunately living in a society where the BJP has defeated all other bourgeois parties in representing bourgeois interests. But that doesn't change the fact that their interests are also similar. But of course, having said that, left parties before anyone else have to come down on a common agenda.
The left has ruled Kerala for the last 10 years, but there was a serious allegation that CPIM was moving away from their ideological core. There was controversies on the PM Shri signing, even though they withdrew later, and also they stood. There was allegations that they stood with the people who spoke Islamophobia publicly. So, how do you, as a CPIML student leader, how do you see that?
No, I think we share a lot of the criticisms that you are bringing to light about our fellow comrades in the CPM. We share a lot of the criticism. I mean, in education alone, the policy that has been brought in, which pushes towards privatization, we have a criticism of that. We have a criticism also of the fact that while our fellow comrades from CPM were sitting on the protest at Jantar Mantar, we witnessed that or even otherwise, not now, because now there is the UDF, but before we've seen that the issues that our fellow comrades from the CPM would uphold in Delhi or in other states, if students would protest, for example, during the Palestine genocide that is ongoing, when students were protesting here in Kerala, in solidarity with Palestine, they were arrested and cases were filed against them. I met an activist today who has an UAPA, who had a UAPA registered. Yes. So a UAPA was registered in his name. It doesn't suit a left government to not only file a UAPA against an activist, but to even believe things like the UAPA as a legitimate law under which any citizen can be penalized. So we have a lot of differences and criticisms for them also. But at the same time, we also believe that they have provided a decisive counter to the fascists here in Kerala. And I think it is true for left forces that if amongst the common people they feel like you're not representing their interests how you should, then you stop being the first choice for them. And maybe that is what we saw here in Kerala. But I really hope that in the coming times we can see the red flag flying high again here.
Do you think the left parties staying in power for a long time create some problems as others allege?
No, I don't think so at all. I think what happened, so CPM is one section of the left, and I'm sure you're aware of this also, that the origin of CPIML comes also from a difference with the CPM. One of the founders or several of the founders of the CPIML were earlier members of the CPM, and our disagreement with them comes on the fundamental fact that we feel like you are no more representing what we joined the party for, and that is why we form a different party, which is the CPIML Liberation. So that is this fracture in representing the voices of the common people. That is where the origin of the CPIML comes from. So whatever criticisms you might have for the CPM, it's possible that we share a lot of those criticisms with you, because we are different from the CPM in that regard. But I don't think it's a generalized way. While the CPM can be seen as one example, we have several other examples. For example, we have the example in Cuba. We have example of several Latin American countries. We have the example of USSR, where people elected, popularly elected communist politics in their country, right? So we have several examples from history where people defeated dictators and authoritarians and elected a socialist or a communist regime, and those socialist and communist regimes were deposed by imperialist powers and interventions from America, Britain, all of those. We've seen that in West Asia, Latin America, here in our own neighborhood in Southeast Asia, we've seen it all. So we know that this generalization, that, do you think the left becomes authoritarian when it is in power? It is a generalization that has years of work behind it. It has been put after a lot of effort, and it has been put specifically against popularly elected communist regimes in the several areas of the world that I am talking about, right? So it's not a common sense. While we can talk about the CPM in Bengal or here in Kerala, that they lost power, or that in Bengal they lost power after ruling for so many decades, it's not true. It's not a general trend that the left loses power or becomes authoritarian. That's not true. The left has a very diverse and varied history of having been in power in the state in several countries and actually representing what another kind of state or another kind of possibility of a world can look like. Facing all forms of imperialist assault, facing all forms of attacks inside and outside from capitalist forces. Yeah.
When we talk about the bigger struggle, we should remember the names Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam. Even people who stand against the Modi regime hesitate to stand openly with the, Umar Khalid or Sharjeel Imam and activists who are in jail for last several years. Their trial has not even started. Why do you think people hesitate to stand with them openly?
No, I see this as the fact that, so what the government does, or what this current dispensation or people in power do, is that they choose. For example, they chose Umar or Sharjeel, and they created such a great amount of propaganda around it. First, they ran a fake video from mainstream media channels. They tried Umar and several other activists on media screens, mainstream media television screens, and declared that they are terrorists. And then they ensured that these activists cannot come out of jail and people actually hear how truly patriotic they are, for lack of a better word. To fight for the betterment of an education system or to fight for equal citizenship in a democratic country is truly patriotic and nothing else. So, to ensure that they stay behind bars and don't come out and people discover that in fact they are great student activists, really insightful, really researched and really wonderful to hear, listen to, they made sure that under UAPA they stay behind bars and no trials happen. So they create so much noise around Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam and other such activists and other such entities also, like don't talk about Muslims. Why? Because you lose an election. Why? Muslims are also part, they'll also vote. Don't talk about Dalits and reservation. Why? Because the right will be behind you. So all of these, these paper tigers that the government creates around student activists and those that the government truly fears is nothing but noise. When somebody says Umar Khalid, a major section of the society stops listening. All they hear is, Umar Khalid, so terrorist, anti-national. That's all that they hear, which is so antithetical to the fact that Umar stood for a world which is completely opposite to that. He stood for a world where even if you disagreed with someone, you could talk it out. That's what JNU's politics taught all of us. That's what student politics taught all of us. But to make Umar's name antithetical to that is truly an irony for all of us. And to to, you know, and for people, you know, when they ask, do you advocate for his release or do you say that he should be released? I really ask that it's not a question of Umar Khalid, you know. It's a question of what kind of a country do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a country where a student activist is declared, he's tried, a student activist is caught, propaganda is run against him, entire doctored videos to doctored photos, pictures are circulated on mainstream television media. He's tried at 9 p.m. on all of the television screens, and then he's not allowed to let out. Years and years go by and no trial even starts. So when people ask, do you stand for the release of Umar Khalid? They're actually asking, do you stand for a society where the judicial system is rendered useless, where it's not the court or the procedure of law which will decide whether a citizen will be free or be condemned or be, you know, convicted? It is in fact at the beck and call of the BJP and the RSS that anyone can be declared a terrorist. Today it is Umar Khalid, so you think it is okay. It can be your child, it can be your own children. 17-year-old Vedant, who gave his 12th standard exams and showed on social media that, oh, this is not my answer sheet. He was called a Pakistani by a BJP member. He could be your child, you know. He could be your kid. If something wrong happens to him and he says that, oh, something wrong happened to me, for that alone, he can be called a terrorist. A UAPA can be labeled against him, and he can stay behind bars for 6 years without the trial even beginning. So Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam's case is about this, about the kind of country that we want to live in, where media paid for by the government and its friends is going to decide who is innocent and who is convicted, or whether it is going to be a rule of law, whether it is going to be judicial procedure which is going to decide who is accused and who is convicted.
Coming to the last question, the Modi regime has been creating new labels for a long time, anti-national as you mentioned earlier. So at last we have Dimagi Naxal. What do these labels say about the condition of our state?
No, I think now the more labels they create, the better it is for us. Because one section is anti-national, other is Pakistani, someone is foreign funded, someone is Khalistani, someone is Dimagi Naxal. So all the people, the common people, democracy-loving people in this country have been labelled something. And the people in power and a few of their henchmen stand in one end. So it is we, the people of this country, against those in power, and whatever labels you throw at us are like badges of honor. Because you are telling us, the moment you throw a label at us, you are telling us, oh, you're not a fascist. Thank you, we are not fascists. You are the fascists. You will leave this country and we are united against you. That is what labeling nowadays means to all of us, I think.